I want to thank you guys, everybody here today, our Rapidan Society members. You guys are a big part of making this work possible. And today we're going to hear from our Superintendent, Tracy Stakely. Tracy, I've had the privilege to get to know and work alongside since, I guess, around October 2024 is when you started with the park. And I will say from the very beginning of kind of working with you and getting to know you, you've really led with good openness and generosity and really a genuine appreciation for what this community means for the park. We really appreciate it. Um, I've seen how much you care deeply about the mission of the National Park Service, and you do bring a wealth of experience and to public lands. Tracy has held a variety of positions during his lengthy NPS career, from his start at the Olmsted Center for Landscape Preservation to Mammoth Cave to Kennesaw Mountain National Battle Park. And just prior to his current superintendency, he served for 5 years as the superintendent of Congaree National Park, as well as I forget the name of that.
Or Sumter.
Thank you, Fort Sumter down in South Carolina. Anyways, I speak for, I think, all of us at the Trust when I say we feel very lucky to have you at the helm. And so without further ado, I want to thank Tracy for joining us. And just real quick, Tracy's going to have a few remarks, and then we will get into some Q&A.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Jessica. I appreciate that. I'm excited to be here this morning, and welcome to all of you who are joining us. As Jessica said, I've been here a little over a year now, and I've been through a whole season of what's been going on at Shenandoah. A year of change, as you all can imagine, but lots of great things happening at the park. I'll just give a little bit of an update of where we are right now, moving into the spring season, and spend most of the time, I guess, with question and answers for you folks. So as you can imagine, we're gearing up for our spring season. Hopefully the worst of the winter weather is behind us, although people keep telling me it may sneak back up on us. But we're moving forward with some hiring. We're able to hire most of all of our seasonal staff that we normally get. So around 100 interns and seasonals will be on board with us this season. We're in the process right now of getting those hired and on board. Over the next month or so, we have a new orientation for employees about every other week with a group coming in. So through the end of April into early May. Our concessions operations begin opening up on March 25th with Big Meadows Campground and Wayside, and then there's a rolling opening over the next month or so of all the different facilities. So by around the 1st of May, everything will be open and fully running, weather agreeable with that. So that's where we are as far as operations. There's a few staffing highlights I want to give to you all. We're able to bring on a deputy superintendent. Luckily, we've got approval to hire that. And Kristen Gibbs will be joining us at the end of May. She's in transition now. She comes to us from the Grand Canyon, where she managed the training center for the National Park Service out there. And she has a long experience with Park Service, actually started her career early on as an intern here at Shenandoah. So she's coming back to join the park. And then just this week, our new administrative officer, Mary Catherine Grady, started with the park as well. So she comes to us from the Washington, D.C. area, where she was working in human resources for the National Park Service. So we're excited to have Mary Catherine on board. Those two positions have been vacant for quite a while, so they really will round out kind of our management team. We also got a really boost this week. We got approval to move forward with hiring a facilities management specialist. So, you know, that position has been vacant for about a year. And Stan has been filling in Stan is our deputy facilities chief, and he's been filling in that position, but we've got approval to hire that. So we'll be going out on the street this week with that, hopefully, and get someone in that position. So we're looking forward to that. As far as overall hiring, we're still under a general hiring freeze, but we are getting these incremental approvals for positions that we put up that are important to keep the park open and running. And so luckily we've got approval to move forward with some of these, and hopefully we've got a few more in the queue that we may get approval for. So we're looking forward to that. A couple of things for projects going on you might see this year. Right now, we've got work underway at Dickey Ridge, putting a new roof on that facility, on the visitor center there. That should be finished by late April. It's moving along pretty well. We're also, you might see work out in the park starting this summer at Old Rag parking lot. We're doing an improvement to the main parking lot there. We'll be paving it and doing some drainage improvements, adding some more restroom facilities and a new station for the rangers down there to collect fees and provide visitor services. So that'll probably start midsummer and work into the fall. Also, you might see improvements starting at Pinnacles and Big Meadows picnic grounds. Those projects are in the works as well. Some repaving, looking at new work on some of the shelters and tables, and some new accessible sidewalks around both of those areas. A project they're working on with the trust is the installation of new automated fee machines. So that's underway. We're going to be starting that at Front Royal. We'll put the first one in. We're right now in the process of getting the purchase contract finalized, but we're grateful to the trust for providing funds to do that for us. And then a couple of other of the trails work we're doing with the trust as well. We're looking at some accessible routes throughout the park over the next few years. So we're in the early planning stages of that with the trust. And then finally, a couple of years down the road, but we're doing planning right now with Federal Highways to do some work on the two main bridges in the park over Highway 211 and Highway 33. So we're in early planning stages and design development. You won't see construction on those bridges until probably 2028, but those will be major infrastructure projects to improve the safety of those both those facilities. And I think I'll stop there. That's about enough status, and I'll leave most of the time for question and answers with Jessica.
It's all very exciting statuses, though. New hires, new projects, things getting updated and fixed. That's very exciting.
Sure.
Thanks, Tracy. All right. Well, we've had some audience members submitted questions early, and then we have a mix of some other questions. So I'm just going to jump into it and start with, I've had the opportunity to kind of get some behind the scenes knowledge of the park, and but always interesting to see from your perspective, Tracy. So when you think about Shenandoah today, what are some of the natural and cultural resources that are receiving particular attention, and why do you think this work is so critical to the park's long-term health?
Well, I think it's critical because it's really our mission. That's why we're here, to preserve both the resources and provide for visitor access and enjoyment of the park. So yeah, it's really key to what we do. I think on the resource end, in both the natural resource and cultural resource areas, we're doing some significant work. The main thing I think we're working on in cultural resources right now is the partnership with the trust, as you know, Jessica, working with the Monacan Indian Nation on some project planning to do a indigenous cultural landscape report for the areas that include the park and surrounding landscapes. So trying to really work to improve our relationship with the tribe and how they engage with us and we engage with them on how to manage these lands. On the natural resource side, we continue to work on a variety of programs that are very specific, like the hemlock woolly adelgid, doing prescribed burns for invasive plant management and just fuel reduction throughout the park. So those are ongoing. One thing we're looking at this year is a project to evaluate impacts on mowing operations to some threatened and endangered species like the monarch butterfly and the rusty patched bumblebee. So those will be new projects that resource management is taking on to monitor and maybe come up with some recommendations for better mowing practices to have less impact on those species. Another natural resource project we just finished up for this year was the liming project down in Meadow Run area. You may have seen that come out in some press releases or on the web. That was a project that was implemented through some mitigation funds we had for air quality. And so we had helicopters come in and do liming over a large area of the park. And then we'll monitor that over the next few years to see if it's had any impact on the acidity of the streams and the landscape there. And then that project will continue again next year with more funding. So we look forward to see how that's worked out for us.
Great.
I think all of that stuff is critical for what we're doing. Yeah, and it's just things keep coming up and we keep trying to address them as we can.
Yeah, I remember Evan, I was talking with him on Sunday at Banff, and he was saying, you know, he did a lot of private land work before he came to the national park, and he said a lot of that, like the lands were in really rough shape, and then you kind of come into the national park and they're in pretty pristine shape. But he's like, it's really hard to keep it that way, and it's so important to, like, you know, keep it healthy. And he's like, it's just a really different way of thinking about work, but he said it's so important. So it was an interesting sort of insight from him.
Yeah, and I think it's just to jump in, I think it's a cycle too. Like I was reading some history of the park the other day, and back when the park was developed, you know, that was when the chestnut blight came through. And so when the park started, there were all of these ghost forests of dead chestnut trees standing around. So, and you go out in the park now and you see a lot of dead trees. It's kind of the same cycle repeating itself with the different species, different effects. So
Yeah, yeah. All right. So a little behind the scenes. What's one aspect of park management that might surprise people? Something they don't usually think about when they're hiking or camping or driving along the drive.
well, when I think about that, and I didn't know this either when I came to the park, having never really been at a large park, but just the sheer number of people it takes to run a park this size. You know, we have a staff of over 250 employees, including permanent and seasonal staff. And then all of the volunteer work that we have behind the scenes and all the work from the trust and the association and the trails, the Potomac Trails Club. Um, it's amazing how many folks it takes to run this park. And most folks that come in, if they're just hiking or, you know, going up to Big Meadows for the day, they may see a ranger, either a law enforcement ranger or an interpretive ranger, or they may see a maintenance person, but they don't really see what goes on behind all that to make sure things are operating fully. You know, we've got law enforcement, we've got dispatch centers, emergency response folks, wildland fire crews, all of the different facilities maintenance folks, from the water treatment plant operators to the people who empty the trash and clean the restrooms, and then the snowplow operators during the winter. Just a variety of things, not to mention all the administrative staff we have behind the scenes making it all run, for, you know, timekeeping and budgeting and contracting. So it's just a huge operation that I think most visitors only see a small glimpse of. And then when you hear those things like, you know, when we have a government shutdown or things like that, it affects a huge number of people here at the park. So
Yeah. I always started when I first started, I also didn't realize all the stuff behind the scenes, but it is like a little city. I mean, it's like you know, you're running a small city in a city that sees almost 2 million people a year, like coming in and out, but there's a lot behind the scenes. Okay. Well, talking about visitors, let's talk about the season, and what are you most excited for visitors to experience as the park starts opening up and coming into the season?
well, I think this year is a big year for us in the park system and for America. You know, we're talking about the 250th commemoration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And even though, you know, Shenandoah is not directly involved with that, in that we're not a Revolutionary War park or not a historical park, I do think it provides an opportunity for folks to get out and enjoy just their national parks in general. I think the national park idea is kind of part of our whole history of being, you know, America. And so taking the opportunity to come out to Shenandoah or go out to any other park that's not necessarily Revolutionary War associated, I think it's a good way to kind of celebrate and commemorate the 250th. Kind of on the heels of that for Shenandoah, I'm excited. You know, this is our 90th anniversary this year. We've decided, as I've mentioned before to folks, not to do a big event here at the park just because there's so much going on for the 250th right at the same time. Our anniversary is on July 3rd, and obviously the 250th celebrations will be around the 4th. But we wanted to make sure we were commemorating the 90th. So all throughout the year, there'll be different programs that are kind of tacked on to what we're already doing. A lot of interpretive programming will be 90th focused. We'll have a few smaller events scattered throughout the year, and we'll advertise those on the website and other places so folks are aware. But I would encourage folks to get out in the park at this 250th year. And, you know, if you want to go to a big event in Washington, great. More power to you, but also you could just come out and hike at Shenandoah and commemorate it that way as well.
And maybe come have some cake with us on the
Yeah,
3rd. I
there
hear
you
there might be
go.
cake. At least I hear that's what Anthony's shooting for, the deputy of Ed and Interp. So,
That sounds good. Yeah.
well, speak kind of back on the visitors, Shenandoah is, as many of our national parks and really our public lands, which is great. People are getting outside and people are loving our public lands. And, I've heard the term loving our parks to death, which, but as we welcome more and more visitors, which is what we want people engaged in their lands, right? How does the park or you and your team think about kind of balancing access and enjoyment with sort of the mission of preservation and care for the landscape? How do you
Yeah.
approach that?
So, as I mentioned briefly, that's really what drives us. It's in our enabling legislation. We're mandated to provide protection, preservation for the resources for future generations, but we're also mandated to provide visitor access and recreation opportunities. And so we take that pretty seriously and try to make sure when we're implementing projects or closures that we take into account ensuring full and public access whenever we can. So, an example recently is like you may have seen back and forth notices on our website during winter weather about, Skyline's open, Skyline's closed, it's open again. And it may seem, a lot of flip-flopping, but with that, we're trying to provide as much visitor access we can during a time of severe weather. So when we're able to get out and open the drive up, we'll open it up for folks, for those who want to come, to make sure we're not just closing down consistently for long periods. The same way when we have, like natural resource projects going on out in the field or like wildfire, prescribed burns, that kind of thing, we really try to limit the closures associated with those types of things to the very minimal that we need for safe operations, for safety of our staff and visitors, but also making sure we want to open up as soon as possible to have folks have access. So, the mandate that we have is to make sure that the park is open and accessible as much as it can be throughout the season. So just know that anytime there's a closure, there's some reason behind it, but we're working to get back open as quick as possible.
So I think kind of, weather constraints are one constraints that the park faces, as well as revenue constraints and even staffing constraints that have nothing to do. I mean, just being able to hire people because you don't have housing, right? Like there are real constraints that every business kind of faces. And we just went through a 43-day shutdown. That created a revenue constraint. But how do these kind of realities, and these are long-term trends, right? We've seen the trends in the last decade. The NPS dollars have sort of continued to stay flat while inflation has risen. Those are just natural things that are kind of happening. And how does this sort of these constraints really shape the long-term planning without changing the visitor's experience? Or maybe it does. I don't know. Like, how do you guys kind of look at that?
Yeah, I think that's the key is long-term planning and flexibility in that. You know, all of those issues that you mentioned certainly have impacts to us, but the team that I have in place here, and I think honestly, the team that is in place at most parks is experienced in that type of flexibility. We have changes from administration to administration with new priorities. For the short term, our long-term priority, as I mentioned, of public access and preservation does not change. So we have to figure out how to work within what we're given to maybe switch gears, have a new focus on something with the resources that we have. Part of our accountability as federal employees and service workers in the government is to make sure that the funds and the resources that we're given by the American people, that we're accountable for how that is utilized. And so we really try as a management team here to look at opportunities for, really leveraging what we have, working with the trust, and what you guys can do is certainly a prime example of how that works for us and our other partners as well. So taking advantages of opportunities when they come along, and realizing also that there are times when we do have to switch gears and we may not be able to do what we have done in the past the way we have done it. So for example, on the natural resource side, if we have been monitoring a certain plot for a species or an invasive, maybe we've done that every year for the past 10 years. but now we just don't have the funding or the staff to do that. So we have to switch gears and say, okay, maybe we can still get what we need, but do it every other year, or maybe switch up the size of the plot, that type of thing. And, and we're working closely with our experts in the field, resource managers on when we make those decisions, but those are things that we have to look at and address as the opportunities and the obstacles come along.
Flexibility.
That's the key, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So as a superintendent, what guides your decision making when you're kind of making these balancing these complex and competing priorities across, this park is really large and fairly diverse in terms of kind of what you're managing. How do you approach this work, Tracy?
Well, my management style is really I try to be very inclusive of everyone and bring all the experts to the table and be less kind of prescriptive in what I'm saying, but really hearing from the experts for whatever the issue is. That might be our internal park management. It might be folks from the Park Service broader that we bring in. It might be our partners or folks in the local community. We're willing, or I'm willing, to take all of that into account as we make those decisions. And the best case scenario for me is when our management team makes a joint decision on something and we all kind of agree on how to move forward. And if we have, disagreement, then it's constructive discussion about what we might need to change. But at the end of the day, we all have to have kind of a certain direction we're moving based on what the information we've been given at the time. So that's how I kind of approach things. Not to say it's always successful, but I think in most cases it seems to be working for us here.
Yeah, I've seen that approach, and I've appreciated that approach in just our work. It's been really nice to just like you kind of alluded to this ADA trails that we're sort of working with the park on, and it was the first time I think that I've been on a project site while we were scoping sort of a trail. And everybody, I mean, from fire management to the natural, I mean, there was like 12 people there, and many of them I had not met. So it was really kind of a fun way to see the different lenses and views in which, kind of really getting buy-in and support of a project. So I really appreciate that. Sometimes it feels like it slows things down, but it is such an important thing. And it was fun to kind of look at how everybody else looks at different things and how it impacts the resource. So it was an interesting thing. So how do partnerships and Shenandoah National Park Trust is not the only partner that you guys work with. So I know you have the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club, and there's obviously the Shenandoah National Park Association, and there might be other partners I'm missing, and you can mention them. But how do these partnerships like us help you kind of with the NPS mission?
Sure. Well, one of our other big partners right now is Delaware North, who runs the concession operation in the field. But yeah, I've said this as many times as I've probably spoken, that we could not do the work that we do here at the park without the level of support we have in the partners, including the trust and the others that you mentioned. Just recent number of projects that the trust has provided or funded for 2027 is nearly 1.2 million in project funding. We just don't have that kind of capacity in-house to run those projects. So things would not happen without that support. Some of the things that you guys have helped us facilitate, like the food storage lockers at the campgrounds, revegetation work at Lewis Mountain, the new artists in residence project that we're doing, renovating Boulder Cabin up at Skyland. All that stuff they're wonderful projects that we would love to do internally just on our own, but that's just not feasible. And at the end of the day, they're all better projects, I think, if we have the trust or other partners involved in that. We can bring them in on the planning. We can get, as we mentioned, new perspectives from folks outside the park on what we should be doing. So I think it's integral in what we do here to make sure that we're partnering with everyone that we can. And not only in partners that can provide funding, but we partner consistently with all the local communities around the park, like the community boards, aldermen, folks that are running these communities, because they have issues with what we're doing and access to the park, and we want to make sure we're working with all of them so that we're all kind of on the same page to promote tourism and recreation in the area and preservation of this resource.
All right, so we have like 5 minutes left, and I do have a couple questions, but there are a couple questions in the chat box, and I was going to pull those up. You may not be able to answer all of them because I think one of them is about search and rescue, and that may need a response back. We may have to do a little research on that one.
Okay.
Send Tracy with some homework, but let's see what you can off the cuff answer, Tracy.
Okay.
So the question is, can you please talk a little bit about how search and rescue is organized and how response times may vary depending on where one is or in the nature of an emergency? Is that a
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I'm not the expert in search and rescue, but I will
yeah.
say, our visitor resource protection group here at the park, led by our chief ranger, organizes the emergency response for search and rescue and preventative search and rescue as well. On the other end, trying to prevent those things from happening, educating basically visitors going out into the park. I will say that all of that is really highly dependent on our partnerships with the local law enforcement and emergency service providers around the park in all of the communities, and also with the park police based in Washington. If you see the helicopters come out usually for search and rescues, those are park police that come out of Washington to assist with those. We don't have in-house aviation here at the park. But if a call comes into our dispatch center here at the park, the rangers on duty are notified of the potential issue. They have an assessment kind of process they go through to see if actually it requires a response or if we can help the person over the phone or radio to get to safety. And then we go from there. And the level of response is really whoever's in charge at that point. The law enforcement officer becomes the incident commander and decides what level is needed. Our folks that are engaged in this have extensive training in search and rescue, and they have annual updates and refresher training on all of those skills. So, they are highly skilled going out, and a lot of the training that they do brings in the external partners as well. So they all are working together throughout the year in training so that when they have to go out in the field together, it's a seamless kind of response. I think I'll leave it at that, but if there's more detail needed, we can follow up for sure.
Sure. I think we're going to have Eric Yunt, who is currently the acting deputy
Chief Ranger.
Chief Ranger, thank you. Acting Chief Ranger. I think he's going to come to coffee and chat here soon. So maybe he can answer those questions. Sure. All right. I have two questions for you, but I'll finish Carolyn's and then my quick questions. We might run a little over, but what keeps you up at night?
Wow.
It's a big one.
That is a big one. Park related. Lots of things that keep me up at night, but
not your housing needs.
Yes. It's making sure that our staff remains safe and that what we're doing is providing safe access for visitors and our staff. This time of year, especially when the storms coming up, there's always calls that come in late at night about certain things happening in the park, or lost hiker or whatever. So that kind of keeps me up a little bit. But I know our staff are well equipped to respond to that, and luckily we've had no real incidents since I've been here that have been tragic. So
that's good.
Yeah, those things keep me up, making sure we're safe in all that we do. So.
All right. Last question. On a personal note, where's a place in Shenandoah? You've been here a year. Part of that's been bad weather. Some of that was, running back and forth to South Carolina as you got your family moved up here. Right. Where's a spot in Shenandoah that you really love?
Well, that's like asking which one of your children you love the best, Jessica.
Well, we all have them.
Right. Yeah. So I will say that there are lots of spots that I like in the park. I love being out at Big Meadows, but when I think about that, I really like going out on some of the trails that are less hiked and a little more remote. I'm not a big long distance hiker, so I tend to go out maybe 1 or 2 miles at a time. And I keep a list. So since I've been here, I think I've had 41 hikes and logged over 91 miles in about 9 months, which I thought was pretty impressive for me. But just getting out and seeing just the vastness of this landscape in what is a real urban area, basically. I mean, we're so close to, huge urban centers, but you can get out in the wilderness here, with a 10-minute hike from Skyline and really have a different experience. So that's kind of what I like to do at all different times of year. I've seen the spring trilliums, which has been great. I've seen the fall color at different trails. So I would recommend that to most folks. Like just get out off the drive and get out from a developed area and see some of the backcountry.
Tracy, are you gonna complete the 500, the Shenandoah 500?
I might. Have
Check that
you?
box. No, I have not.
Okay.
No, it's a big commitment. I don't quite have the time to commit, but
Let's see. I've done 91 miles in,
that's
in
pretty
a
good.
year, so I've got 4
Yeah.
more years. There you
Yeah,
go.
you got it. Check, check, check. You might have to start hiking a little bit more longer distance,
Yeah,
Tracy.
maybe so. Maybe so.
So, all right. Well, we're done here. Tracy, do you have any last minute things you'd like to say before we depart ways?
I just want to thank you all again for the support that you give us. Not only financially, but volunteer hours and for just coming out and being a part of what we do, participating in our programs, hiking our trails, and sharing our park with other folks. I think that's really important in getting out in the community and telling folks about us. So thank you for the trust. Thanks to everyone who joined us this morning, and I hope to see you out in the park sometime soon.